I am thrilled to introduce you today to Scott Prendergast, and we are going to talk about navigating life through the lens of hope. Scott is an inspirational speaker and a mental health advocate. Scott, man, I just listened. I just said this to a couple of your talks, and I just kept thinking, all right, my listeners just need to settle in, get excited because you have so much inspiration and hope to spread over us, and we are spoiled today. So, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking about this, and I hope that anyone who watches this today, they could just take something small, just the smallest bit of what I say today and apply it to their own lives and say, hey, you know what? If you're in that place right now where you're struggling, life's not going exactly how you want, I hope that from listening to me today, you're like, hey, it gives you some hope. You get a couple strategies that you can use to help you move forward that difficult time that you're in right now in life. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me on.
Oh my goodness. You don't think everybody's life's going perfect right
Not,
now?
I thought maybe, but I'm thinking now maybe it's
Just
not.
in case.
Just in
Yeah,
case. There's
just
that
on the
1%
outside.
sure.
Oh, where do we start though? I feel like I have so many questions. So, how did you become an inspirational speaker in the first place?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So for me, back when I was in college, I suffered with a pretty deep depression. But I remember I came to this point about junior year where I said, okay, I have a decision to make right here. I can either complain about this depression and I can sit here and I can say, hey, you know what? This isn't fair. Why this is happening to me all my life? Or I can make an effort to try to move past it. I can make an effort to try to seek some help and say, hey, you know what? What can I do to kind of take back control of my life, so to speak? And that's really what I did. I started to do a lot of research about something called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what they teach a lot in, mental health therapy, whatever it might be. So I would do a lot of this research, and then I found that this stuff really started to work for me, and I
Hmm.
started to see results. And I said, okay, I know I'm not the only person who struggled with this in my life. I know I'm not the only one who's going through a hard time. So I figured if I could overcome this, maybe I can help other people to do it too. And I really started to develop a passion for doing that and taking what I learned and what I've used in my life and giving it to other people too to help them find that light in the darkness as well. And what really started how it got legitimized is I would write for this website just about going through depression and the everyday struggles that we all face. And it got pretty popular, thankfully. And this organization that I still part-time speak for actually found out about me. And they asked me to come in and speak with them, go through the training process. And long story short, I started speaking part-time for this organization. I would go to different schools all over the country and kind of share my own story. And then from there, I developed even more of a passion to where I started my own business called Scotty P Inspiration here. And that's where I opened up to an even broader audience. So not only speaking to students, but speaking to everybody, whoever it might be, from the age of 10 to 110, and whoever it is, and how to help them really navigate life through the lens of hope, which is my slogan.
Yes, and I love it. And we're just spoiled today because like you said, you can speak to a 10-year-old, 110-year-old. And today you're mostly getting women and they're anywhere from 30s to 70s is our little niche. And not that there aren't others out there listening, but your message it spreads across everybody. And so one of the things that you had mentioned, just the how do we find hope when everything's falling apart? We're coming out of COVID. I feel like that's a valid question from so many reasons, whether it's an external environment thing or whether it's just within our own home or mental illness, like you said. So I would love to hear about this.
Yeah, of course. And this is a question that people would ask me so much that I was like, you know what? Maybe I should start to really come up with some material and really look back at my own life about what I did from it. I mean, and let's be honest here. Every single person who's watching this right now, every single one has been affected by COVID-19, this pandemic in some type of way. Every single person. And it's been hard. I don't think there's a single person in this world who the past year and a half has said, hey, these have been some of the best years. I'm really loving life. No, I mean, we're honest here. We're acknowledging that things are difficult. So for me, and what I do and what I talk about is that when everything's falling apart, how do we find hope? I think it really starts with three little things. Number one is acknowledgement. And I say this because if we try to live in this world where we're not acknowledging that things are hard, how are we ever going to be able to move past it, right? It's kind of like if there's a brick wall in front of us. If we don't acknowledge it's there, how are we ever going to be able to drive around it or walk around it, right? We have to first acknowledge that our pain is here, our pain is valid, and our pain is real, and that things maybe aren't going the best for us. So that's number one is acknowledgement. Number two is something that I like to call planting the seeds of positivity. Now, I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I think it is an absolutely essential thing in trying to find hope. So what I mean by that is that when we're going throughout our day, we have a choice about what we're going to say to ourselves, right? Now, a lot of times we don't think that's so. We just think, oh, well, Scott, whatever pops into my head and I can't control it. Yes, correct to a degree. However, what we can control is how what we choose to act on and what we choose to really meditate and focus on in our mind up here. Now, when I say planting the seeds of positivity, I mean going throughout your day and finding little bits, little pieces of hope, of joy, of resilience, whatever that looks like for you, and really allowing it to grow and take root in your mind. So, for instance, one of the things for me, what I always do is that when things are going hard, I watch, this is funny, but I watch Seinfeld. I love watching Seinfeld, the old TV show. And every time I watch it, I imagine myself planting a little seed of joy right up here in my head. And for anybody who's ever done any gardening, you know that the more seeds that you plant, the better chance you have at something starting to grow, right? So what I'm doing is I'm planting the seed of hope and joy and of laughter in my mind up here, and I'm allowing it to grow. And that way I'm giving myself something else to focus on besides the pain, besides the hurt, besides the fact that everything in my life is falling apart right now. So that's kind of a second step. So number one, we want to acknowledge. Number two, we want to plant the seeds of positivity. And number three, we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the time to be resilient. And we're giving ourselves the ability to say, hey, you know what? This isn't going to be a process overnight. You know, finding hope takes some work, just like anything else. It takes a little bit of work to find some hope in our lives and to dig it out of the ground and bring it into our lives. And one of the things that I always tell people is, hey, look, hope is there every day. But here's the thing, sometimes it's covered. Sometimes it's in the back closet behind old coats and umbrellas. Sometimes it's behind the pots and pans. Sometimes you got to get your hands dirty, dig in the ground to rip it out, right? But that hope is there. It's just about if we're willing to put the effort in to find it. And if we're willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm acknowledging things aren't going well, but I know that hope's there. I know I'm going to find it today. So I know that was a very long-winded answer, but I'm pretty passionate about it. So in review, number one, we want to acknowledge when things aren't going well. Number two, we want to work on planting the seeds of positivity up here. And number three, we want to give ourselves time to be resilient. I think if we're doing those three things, we're going to be able to find some of that hope in our lives.
Oh, no, it's perfect. And don't you feel like, thank you for mentioning time, because I know that we live in this microwave society and everybody wants everything very fast, that it always keeps coming back to time and that permission to slow and steady wins the race little by, but like settle in, right? How do you help your people settle in a little bit? What's your go-to method on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And because it's so true. And unfortunately, where we live in today, especially me, is in the younger generation, when I talk to people my age, everybody's so used to having whatever they want right now. I want
Mhm.
to talk to my friend, let me just dial on the phone. I want food, let me order it from Grubhub. Everything's so instantaneous. And when we set that as the bar, as the standard, instantaneous, anything that doesn't live up to that bar, we're going to be disappointed with, and then we're going to be frustrated with. So what I do to help people kind of settle in is I do a few different things. But number one is I ask people to keep track of their progress in a journal, with post-its, maybe even a video diary, whatever it is. Now, the reason that I do this is so that when people start to feel frustrated, like, oh man, I haven't made any progress, I say, stop, take a look in your notes from a week ago. Take a look at your video diary from 2 weeks ago and look at where you were there and what you were saying there and where you are now. Now, even if you haven't made a ton of progress, just the fact of looking at it, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I am moving forward. I am finding, some good things in my life at this time. And I think when we do that, it really puts in perspective for us to say, hey, look, although it's not a ton of progress, although I'm not right where I want to be right now in the second, I
Mhm.
am moving forward. I have become better in some type of way, and I am finding some reasons to have some hope and joy in my life. So it's really just about kind of tricking your mind, so to speak, to realizing that you are making progress, even if it doesn't come instantaneously like that.
Right, right. Oh, it was so interesting. I had a client the other day ask me, he's like, can you tell me some of your big success stories? And I was like, I'm going to disappoint you because they're big in a small way. Like it's because somebody can look back now and say, my brain has shifted. And that doesn't feel like Biggest Loser style fun story, right? It's just, but it's real. And yeah, it's exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So I also want to talk about this. I think you and I are soulmates on this. Aiming for direction in our lives. How do we aim for that direction versus striving for perfection?
Yeah, and I that's one of the reasons why I love your podcast is because that is so true. I mean, when you strive for perfection, guess what? You're always going to be disappointed because you can't be perfect. It's simply not possible. And so I love how you said that, aiming for direction. And I think one of the most important things to do for that is really setting like just realistic goals with where you want to be in a shorter period of time. I'm sure we all have our long-term goals. Some people are like, I want to be president. I want to make $10 million, whatever it is. We've all got that. And that's great. Of course, I love it. But we want to make sure that we have those short-term kind of little pit stops along the way and trying to hit those things and saying, hey, you know what? Let me try to reach this goal today. But if not, this is where the important part comes in. If I don't reach the goal today, I'm not going to pick myself apart. I'm not going to tell myself that I'm worthless. I'm not going to tell myself that I don't matter. I'm not going to say that I failed. No, you did not. You're just on a little bit of a different route to get to where you need to go. That's okay. Just like a detour, right? We've all been there when Google Maps tells us to go a different way because there's a car crash or construction or whatever it is, right? Well, in the same way in life, when we go along the path of when we're trying to get somewhere, it's not always going to look like how we want. It's not always going to look exactly like what we cooked up in our mind up here. And that's okay. That's all part of it. Because if it did go exactly as we cooked up here, that would probably be pretty weird, honestly. It'd be like we had telekinesis or something, honestly. So I think it's really important to just say, hey, you know what? I'm loosely setting goals, but if I don't hit them exactly how I want, that's okay. I'll adjust along the way and adding kind of, you know what? This is the best way to put it. Expanding your expectation to include what you didn't plan for. I think that is the most important thing to do, and not beating yourself up and striving for direction instead of perfection.
It's so good. So what do you tell to your person who goes, that feels fluffy to me, and like I want to be hitting these grandiose goals, and if I settle into this all this grace and all this like gentleness, then I'm no longer that person, trying to aim for the stars, be the best.
Right. And yeah, I've had a lot of people kind of say similar things like that. And I always tell them one thing. I was like, okay, well, are you happy living that type of lifestyle? Are you happy with that constant scrutiny of yourself? Are you happy with that constant stress and putting yourself down because you're not where you want to be? And I simply just ask people those questions. And a lot of people take time to think and say, oh, well, I guess probably not. And then every once in a while, you have the person that says, yes, I can't get anything done in life if I'm not being my own worst critic. I'm like, okay, well, to those of us who aren't like that, what I always like to, because not everybody is go, 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 go all the time. I know I'm not that type of way. I'm the type of person who I kind of spurt ability, little spurts, little here, little there. Then I stop and like to reflect. So really for me, what I always like to say is like, okay, look, just because you're taking a day by day approach doesn't mean that you won't still get to that long-term goal. Just because you're taking a day by day approach and you're paying attention to your mental health and to your own self-care, that doesn't mean you're soft. That doesn't mean you're weak. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. It just means that you're being more attentive to your own needs along the way. And really, I think in the long term, that'll help you to get to that long-term goal because you're not burning out, because you're not becoming frustrated with yourself, and you're not putting yourself down with all type of negative self-talk, really.
Great. Ah, so good. Yes. Okay, I think you're gonna love this one too. I heard it in church the other day, direction with correction, which really lit up. I was like, oh, that's good, because it is. It's always you started to go this direction, course correcting. And you also talk a lot about mental pathways. Can you go into how you view mental pathways?
Yeah. The mental pathways is a huge thing. And that's something I did a lot of research on. So when we're talking about neural pathways, very basically, this is what it is. So think about any time you've ever walked in the woods. I'm sure we can all think of a time kind of like that, or walked on a trail in a park, anything like that. And you always come to a point where there's one little trail that's very worn down, right? It's people a lot of weight have taken it a lot. It's very clear. You can see it. Then you have the idea where you want to kind of create another trail because maybe you want to go to another different direction, right? Something that you're not as familiar with. Well, that's what neural pathways do. So when we constantly beat ourselves up, for instance, if every time that we fail at something, we say, I'm worthless, or every time we don't achieve our goal, we say, I don't matter. We're taking that same old worn down path of the neural pathways that's doing that. That's saying, hey, you know what? This is my reaction to this emotion. And that is a dangerous thing because when we go down these neural pathways over and over and over again, we become so comfortable that it gets really difficult to kind of create new ones. So what we need to do is that the next time you face an adverse situation, or the next time you're tempted to tell yourself, I don't matter, I'm worthless, I can't do anything right, I need you to stop right there. We need to stop And we need to envision taking that less traveled path and creating a new pathway that's going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I didn't achieve this goal today, but I know that doesn't define who I am. Or, hey, you know what? Maybe today something bad happened, but I know it's just one day, and that doesn't mean every day is going to be the same. And when we make the choice to choose a different response to something that happens in our lives, we're creating new neural pathways. Now, this takes time. There's some people that say it takes 10,000 times of repetition to create a new neural pathway. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it's necessarily that long, but regardless, it's a process. I have people tell me, it's like, hey, Scott, I've been working on this positive self-talk and creating these new neural pathways. It's been about a week and I don't see it working at all. And I say, oh, well, guess what? You're right where you're supposed to be. It's not supposed to. This takes time. You have to make a commitment in your mind that says, hey, I don't care what's going on. I don't care what's happening, but I'm going to keep trying this. I'm going to keep attempting to be positive. I'm going to keep filling my mind with the right ways of thinking and the right things to say. And if you do that, I can guarantee you over time, you will start to see that new neural pathway take place, and you will be able to become comfortable with doing it. And it will become second nature. It doesn't happen overnight, but when it does, you can really tell a difference. And that's something called neuroplasticity. And I don't have a degree in that or anything, but it's something that I've worked on in my own life. And that's why I'm here today. I used to be the person that every time something went wrong, I blamed myself and told myself all the reasons why I was never going to be enough for anybody in this world. But I realized I had to switch that type of thinking if I was going to amount to anything in this life. And that's what I did. And that's why I want to help other people do the same thing too.
Oh, I love it. I think that that's such a good example from an emotional standpoint, as well as I can really see those pathways with just habitual change, just something even as far as, because I think a lot of times when we're trying to make any type of change, our self-talk or our habits in our life, that we can easily go, does it matter? Does it matter in this moment? Does it matter if I grab this cookie as I walk through the kitchen? Or does it matter if I take that one silly little 10-minute walk? And now if we insert that into your visual, that that 10-minute walk means we went on a different path versus the well-traveled path, then we're ultimately changing something and it's for the greater good versus thinking I can burn X amount of calories in that 10 minutes. And then it becomes pointless. So I guess just for the listeners, just to get to interject this at this moment, but if we really think of it as we're trying to carve out that next new path, then everything matters. All of your changes in that day, all of your efforts in that day, they matter. So thank you for that awesome visual.
Yeah.
Why did you brought up video games in one of and you had a great analogy with it, and I'm blanking on how video games got brought up.
I'm trying to think what, because I
I
always
know
do.
you had like little gems and like upping your levels. So like you were picturing it as if you make these changes or if you do these, then you get to increase to the next video game level type of thinking. And we can move on
Oh,
if that was probably a long time ago.
yeah,
Probably.
no, I know it's on the tip. I know what you're talking about because I remember when I was saying it, and it was a great thing. And I was like, oh man. Okay, I think I remember. So I'll real quick try to tackle it because I know what it was. So essentially, what I was saying, yes, starting to come back to me, is looking like when you're playing a video game. For anyone who I'm sure everyone's played some type of game at some point, whether it was something like Pac-Man or something today, whatever it is. But you go throughout and you kind of gather up little like hidden gems, little coins and stuff like that, right? We all kind of do that. It's like, oh, I got 20 coins. And when you get those coins, you get to that next level. And when you get to that new level, you unlock all these new features, right? You unlock like, oh, now I got a new weapon or I get a new car for my characters, stuff like that. Well, look, in the same way in our lives, when we go throughout the day, we're always collecting different experiences. We're collecting different feelings, different emotions. And when we collect enough of these things and choose to use them in the right way, that's when we unlock this new way of thinking. And we unlock this new ability to look at situations through a different lens and saying, oh, wow, today, because of this hardship I went through, though, I'm on a new level of thinking that I wasn't previously at. Now I'm able to view this as a good thing, whereas in the past, I used to view it as a bad thing. So I think throughout everybody's day, imagine it like this. Imagine like you're going and you're picking up coins here or there. Whatever happens, here's 10 coins, here's 10 coins, there's another coin. And at some point, when we gather enough of that experience, we're going to be able to level up to a new level of thinking. Our circumstances might not change, but how we're viewing them is going to change.
Ah, see, we would have totally missed out. Good job. You way to pull that back out. I'm super impressed on the spot. You
Thank you.
must
I
be a
was never,
professional.
maybe.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. Oh, so good. Okay. You also mentioned, how do we learn to acknowledge our pain without letting it consume us? So I don't want to let time go without talking about this. This is important.
Of course, yeah. And I hear a lot of different stuff in today's society about people defining themselves by their pain. And I think that's a dangerous thing. When you define yourself by pain, then you start to think that you're you are that pain, that that's all there is to you. And that's simply not the case. But then on the other end of the spectrum, I hear people that are saying, oh, everything's all good all the time. I don't let anything bother me. It's all good. And we kind of live in this fantasy world too. And that's not a good thing either. Both of them on either end of the spectrum, they have detrimental side effects to our health, both physical and mental. So what I think is important is, look, where you're at in your life right now, you have to acknowledge that pain. You can't suppress it. You have to say, hey, look, this is what's going on in my life right now. And you know what? It's hard. It's tough. I'm having a difficult time with it. You have to go through that process. That's really important, because going through that process of acknowledging your pain, that's the first step to recovery. That's the first step to moving past it. If you don't do that, then how in the world can you get to recovery? So, but what I think is important is, and where sometimes humans we get stuck, is taking that next leap. And then you have some people, they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm acknowledging my pain all day. I'm shouting to the world about what I went through. And that's great. But what's that next step? What's that next step to saying, okay, I'm acknowledging it. Now, how do I move forward past it? How do I define myself by what I want to define myself by, not by an experience I had in the past? And real quick, one of the just basic things that I think you can do, that we can all do to help us acknowledge that pain and move forward from it, is to write it out. And what I tell people a lot is, write out this experience, write out that painful thing, whatever it is in your life, and write it out fully. And then go back and look at it. And with a different color pen or pencil or marker, as you go throughout that little experience, take and write down little good things that come from that. And
Mm.
at first you might be like, well, Scott, how in the world can I find anything good about the pain that I went through? But really think about it. And maybe you see a sentence that says this or that. And then on the side, you can write down, hey, you know what? Because I went through that, I now know how to handle this. Because of when I went through that, I got a new relationship in my life. Because I dealt with that, I have, this new passion for this other job. And start to go back and really make note of that. And when we do that, our subconscious mind is really going to kind of like search for results that also equate to that type of thinking. And that's the
Yeah.
thing that's kind of cool that we don't always realize.
Yeah, no, that's good. Agreed. You seem super open. So I think this could be helpful for our audience. I know you've surface level given us, you have a past history of depression, kind of exactly how you went through that process. And I'm sure now, as a professional inspirational speaker, and to the person who doesn't know your past, you could probably fight against people who are like, you're just always positive. It just comes easy to you. So you've been through it all. If you could give us just a little glimpse into that journey, I think that'd be helpful for hope.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course. And you know what's funny is, yeah, I do get that a lot. People are like, oh, you're just a naturally positive person. Let me tell you, I am not. Oh, this takes work. When I was younger, I was the person who, I think in some type of way, of me being negative, when I did that, it meant, okay, if I just have a bad outlook on everything, I won't have to try. And if I don't have to try, that means I won't have to deal with failure. And if I don't have to deal with failure, then I won't feel terrible about myself. And that was
Mhm.
kind of, unfortunately, my outlook for a long time. So for me, to really quick summarize, when I was in college dealing with depression, it got to the point where, I started to barely ever leave my room. I didn't want anything to do with anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want to do anything because I thought I didn't deserve anything, because I thought I was a worthless person and my life didn't matter and that there was no reason for me to even be here. And I fed thoughts like that all throughout the day. And that's one of the things I always talk about, is what thoughts are you feeding? What thoughts are you starving? Well, I was feeding these thoughts of, Scott, your life is worthless. You don't matter. You're a failure. You'll never be anything. And it got to a point where I remember I had times where I was like, do I really want to still live on this earth or not? And I never attempted suicide, but I had suicide ideation a lot. But thankfully, through my faith and then through some close family members and some people that are close to me, I was able to start to say, hey, you know what? We can get out of this. There have been people who have been here before and they've made it. So maybe I can do the same thing. And that's when I started to really write. I found that as therapeutic. I started to really get into my faith more, which helped me tremendously. I started to open up to people, and I started to realize this passion that I had for helping others. And every time that I talked about these things, not only did it help them, but it also helped me a lot as well. And just
Mhm.
becoming open, I found my greatest strength was in my vulnerability, really. And that's something I still use to this day.
And you do, and you're wonderful with it. But has it always come that easy? I think some of the people that feel the most hopeless also are the ones that are like, I can't even imagine spilling my deepest, darkest thing that's bothering me. Or, I mean, you can easily in one sentence say I had suicidal ideation. And for somebody else, that would be like, I could never get to that. That terrifies me. And again, like, I know it was a process for you, but was there just that day or that moment where you're like, it's just bad enough, I'm just throwing it all out there? Or how did that happen for you?
Yeah, and that's a great point because it is different for everybody, and it was a process. When I first started doing this, I was not into letting people know my deepest, darkest secrets. I remember the first time I started speaking with that organization I mentioned before. They're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, you get in front of these 500 kids and you share your story," and I'm like,
Like,
I don't want to do that. I was 21 years old at the time. I was still in college. These kids were like 18. They were like 3 years apart. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm scared. I don't want them to think I'm weird or something. But this is how I look at it. And this is how I found out that what worked for me, and maybe it can work for someone else. That pain that we all experience on the inside, it's like a deep wound that just never stops gushing blood. It's always gushing, it's always oozing out. And we try to put band aids on it, but band aids don't heal internal wounds, do they? No. But I found something here. I found that when I take that pain that I've been through and I use it and I view it as something, as a tool that's going to help somebody else, it starts to stitch up that wound little by little, and it doesn't keep bleeding out. Whereas if I just keep it inside and I just think of it to myself, it's going to constantly keep bleeding out and it's never going to heal because I'm not using it to help somebody else. So for
yeah.
me, and what I think is important for other people to try to do too, is realize there's power in your story and there's power in your experience. And you have no idea how somebody might relate to your story, and you have no idea the impact it might make on their life. You have no idea unless you finally open up and start to talk about it. And you start to go through that surgery, so to speak, on the inside of stitching up that wound instead of just trying to put a band aid on it. And be kind with yourself. Be kind with yourself. You're not going to wake up the next morning and say, you know what? Woo, I'm talking about my deepest, darkest fear. Absolutely not. It's baby steps. So you know what you do? Maybe tomorrow, maybe write about it. Maybe the day after that, maybe call a family member and talk about one of the experiences you've had. Then after that, maybe when you go on a date, talk about it with somebody. Or maybe after that, maybe write a blog about it. Take little steps forward until you get to a point where you're comfortable to really start letting that out. And again, like I said, it takes time. Be kind with yourself. Everybody's timeline is different,
Yeah.
but take those first steps. I think if you do that, you're going to really start to see a change in yourself.
So good. Such a great answer. Thank you. Thank you for all of your vulnerability. And again, I think you probably come at this as I do in the world. It's like if we can change one person, and it obviously changes more, but then that one moment of opening up was worth it. So you are a professional speaker. Tell our audience exactly what you offer in the world, where to find you.
Yeah, of course. So what I do is I do speaking engagements. So whether it's in front of a huge audience at a community center, if it's for a club, a group, if it's a school, pretty much any type of event, you can have me come and speak to, whether it's a faith-based event, whether it's an event for, just anything really. I'll speak about the topics in which you want me to talk about. I always tailor my topic specifically to what that person wants me to speak about. Obviously, I'll still put the material in my way, but I'm very flexible with it. And the best way you can find me is you can check me out on my website, which is www.scottypinspiration.com. Or I'm very active on Instagram and Facebook. So Instagram, I'm Scotty P underscore inspo, INSPO. You check me out on that way. And then Facebook, just under Scott Prendergast. And I also offer one-on-one life coaching services. So we can do it whether virtual, in person. And like I said, any type of event I'll speak at, and we can always go through the process of what that looks like and what you want me to talk about.
Fabulous. All right. And all of that will be in the show notes. So if you are out running or doing laundry or wherever you get your podcast, don't worry. It's all labeled there for you in the show notes. And I always end this way with my guests, but like, what is your last bit of wisdom or inspiration that you would just like to wrap your arms around our listeners and send them off with today?
Absolutely. So I would just like to say to everybody right now is that look, whatever challenge that you're facing in your life, whatever difficulty you're trying to overcome, whatever mountain stands in your way right now, I just want you to know that it's temporary, that none of these challenges that you face in your life, that darkness, it always has to end. Darkness always flees given the presence of light every single time. That's just a fact. So I want everybody to know that your pain will end. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know in what way, but it will. And if you can, in that dark time right now, look to grasp for that little bit of light that you see way in the distance, hold on to that with everything that you have and know that in time that light will illuminate so brightly that it'll help other people to grab the light that they see in their life too way in the distance. So be kind to yourself, acknowledge your pain, and know that you'll get through it, and look for people to help you through those difficult times as well, because you have to know that you don't have to do this by yourself. You don't have to do it on your own, that there is help available. You can seek it, but above all else, know that that person that is inside of you, that little inner man or woman, that person is stronger than you think, and you keep plugging away, you keep working forward, and you will see the light in your life. You will be happy again. I can guarantee it because I've been there. And so I hope everybody can take that and run with it today and just know that no matter what, things will get better. Just give it some time.
You're such a blessing. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course, thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me. I really appreciate it. It was awesome. And I'm so glad that you reached out and that we're able to make this happen. And I hope people can be inspired by it.
Oh, I guarantee it. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.